I moved to Ridgeway Pines for peace. After 20 years in the Air Force, most of them elbows deep in engine grease or dodging bullets in places the map doesn't like to talk about, I wanted one thing: quiet. So when I found a modest 2-story home with a detached 3-car garage and a backyard big enough to breathe in, I didn't hesitate. I signed the papers, packed up my life, and left the noise behind. Or so I thought. The neighborhood was postcard perfect. Manicured lawns, pastel mailboxes, and polite nods that didn't quite reach the eyes. It was all good until I met her. Karen Langston, Vice President of the Homeowners Association. Platinum blonde, power-walking, clipboard-wielding dictator of Ridgeway Pines. She introduced herself the day after I moved in, marched up to my porch, scanned my driveway like it offended her very soul, and frowned at my covered Harley. "Just a friendly visit," she chirped. "We have aesthetic standards in the Pines. Covers need to be HOA-approved color schemes. Yours is not compliant." I stared at her. "It's gray." "Slate. The guidelines say taupe or olive." She smiled without smiling. "You'll receive a formal notice." And she turned and walked away. At first, I laughed it off. Thought maybe she was one of those neighborhood busybodies who just needed to feel important. I wasn't looking for trouble. But trouble doesn't always knock. It slides under your garage door when you're not looking. The warnings came quickly. Notes taped to my mailbox. Digital notices from the HOA citing vague violations like non-conforming tools visible from the driveway or inappropriate use of garage space. I hadn't even unpacked half my gear. Still, I kept my head down. The garage was my haven, my therapy. I'd set it up with surgical precision. Workbenches lined with socket sets, a hydraulic lift in the center bay, 2 vintage motorcycles in various stages of restoration. I kept it clean, organized, quiet. So when I returned one afternoon from the hardware store and found Karen's silver Lexus SUV parked inside my garage, I thought I was hallucinating. Not in the driveway. Not near it. Inside. The garage door was open when I left. A 10-minute trip, tops. I stood there for a moment, stunned. The SUV idled like it belonged there, its front bumper a few inches from my rolling tool chest. Then I saw the vanity plate. Karen HOA. I walked straight to her house, past the manicured hedges and gnomes wearing seasonal scarves, and rang her doorbell like I was calling in an airstrike. Karen answered, already smug. Like she'd been waiting. "Marcus," she said, too sweet. "I assumed you wouldn't mind. Your garage was open, and I had a last-minute HOA meeting to prepare for. There's limited street parking today." I clenched my jaw. That's my private property, not a shared lot. Oh, but per HOA guidelines, open garages fall under Provisional Community Access. Clause 14b. There's no such clause. Her smile thinned. Maybe you should reread the bylaws. I walked away. Not because I didn't have words. Plenty of those came to mind, but because every one of them would have escalated things into territory I'd promised myself I'd never revisit. I was here for peace. For once, I wanted to solve something without collateral. I waited in the garage until she came to retrieve the SUV. She didn't even make eye contact. Just pulled out like it was her driveway. That night, I pulled out the HOA binder, the one I barely skimmed when I moved in. No clause 14b. No mention of open garages being fair game. I emailed the HOA president, Harold something, with a copy of the incident and a formal complaint. The reply came within hours. "Karen has informed us she was given verbal permission to use your garage due to an emergency situation involving neighborhood security." Complaint close. Security? Verbal permission? My hands trembled. Not with fear. With fury held barely in check. She'd lied. Boldly. Easily. And the board didn't even question it. That night, I installed a motion-activated camera above the garage door. I wasn't about to let her rewrite the truth again. Because this wasn't just about a car in a garage. It was about someone who thought the rules didn't apply to her. And someone else, me, who'd spent a lifetime following rules, only to learn that some people weaponize them. Karen had just picked the wrong guy to push. And I was done backing down. Karen didn't park in my garage again for 2 days. Then, Just before dusk on Friday, I caught her Lexus nose deep in my bay once more. She'd timed it while I was walking Jasper, my German shepherd, around the block. My security camera pinged me mid-stride. I broke into a jog. By the time I got back, the garage door was wide open, the Lexus humming, and Karen was inside, on her phone, adjusting her rear-view mirror like she owned the concrete beneath her tires. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She looked up. Didn't flinch. I have guests over. Street's full. I'll be gone in an hour. You're not using my garage as overflow. You left it open, she said, almost bored. Again. That implies access. You really should be more careful, Marcus. She said my name like it was a problem. You're trespassing, I said quietly. That's not a gray area. Karen's eyes narrowed, but her smile held. Then close your garage if it bothers you. You're the one creating opportunities. That night, I locked it, deadbolted, even installed a timer to ensure it auto-closed. And still, she found ways in. Once through the side door, once by lifting it manually. She was relentless. And every time I filed a complaint, the HOA circled the wagons around her like she was untouchable. The board's official stance? As VP, Karen has certain administrative privileges in enforcing neighborhood standards. She had rewritten the rulebook and named herself sheriff. I responded the only way I could. I documented everything. Footage. Time-stamped photos. Recorded conversations. I kept it all in a hard drive labeled insurance. But still, Karen escalated. She stopped hiding it. Started treating my property like a shared amenity. Then came the day she crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I was finishing a restoration, a cherry red 1966 Triumph Bonneville that I'd been working on for months. Polished chrome, new pipes, hand-stitched leather seat. I parked it in the center of the garage, set up a few lights, and took photos for the online showcase I planned to submit. I closed the garage door, checked the lock, and went inside to prep dinner. 20 minutes later, I returned to cover the bike. What I found instead was heartbreak. A deep, deliberate scratch snaked across the gas tank. Not accidental. Not incidental. It was carved. A malicious wound on a machine I'd poured soul into. And beneath it, on the concrete floor, lay a jagged key. Not mine. I picked it up slowly, heartbeat thunderous in my ears. Checked the camera feed. And there she was. Karen. Walking in through the unlocked side door, probably left ajar by mistake. She stared at the bike for a few seconds, then reached into her pocket, leaned down, and dragged the key along the tank like she was signing a signature. Then she left. No hesitation. No remorse. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I sent the footage to the HOA board with a brief message. Criminal damage. Consider this a formal report. 3 hours later, I received a response. Footage unclear. No conclusive evidence of intent or identity. No further action to be taken. They didn't even pretend to care. Didn't even ask if I'd contacted the police. I hadn't. Not yet. Because the moment I saw that key, something shifted inside me. This wasn't about rules anymore. Or bylaws. Or vintage motorcycles. This was about power. Abuse. Entitlement. And I wasn't going to let her win. I made 2 calls that afternoon. One to Julio Reyes, an old friend from my Air Force days, now the owner of a towing and salvage yard on the edge of town. The other to my insurance agent, to confirm the Triumph's coverage and document the damage. I wasn't going to get the bike's purity back. But I could still reclaim something else. Control. Justice. Maybe even a little poetic symmetry. I told Julio to keep his flatbed ready. No questions asked. Just stand by. Because the next time Karen parked in my garage, I wasn't going to ask her to move. I was going to make her disappear. It didn't take long. 3 days after the Triumph incident, Karen took the bait. I'd left the garage door open. Not wide. Just enough to tempt. The lights were off, no signs of activity, no barking dog. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, and I was upstairs cleaning my rifle when the motion alert pinged. I watched through the security app as Karen's Lexus crept into frame. She paused at the edge of my driveway like a cat sniffing a mouse hole, then slowly nosed the SUV forward, inching under the raised door. She exited, clutching a small binder, likely filled with HOA nonsense, then strutted off down the sidewalk like she'd just filed a legal victory. I waited a full 2 minutes. Then I made the call.
Julio, I said.
She's in. His engine was already running before I finished the sentence. Julio's flatbed rolled up 10 minutes later. No flashing lights, no clatter. Just quiet steel purpose. I opened the side door to the garage and nodded toward the Lexus. He chuckled, low and gleeful. She really parked inside?
Clear as day.
I've got time-stamped video. I'll email it to you after. Julio ran his hand along the side of the vehicle like a jeweler inspecting a fake diamond. This is gonna be fun. He worked fast. Winch hooked. Rear tires up. The Lexus groaned in protest, but offered no real resistance. Within minutes, it was latched down, strapped secure, and headed for his yard. Technically a licensed scrapyard, but unofficially, it doubled as a graveyard for stupidity. She didn't return for hours. I stayed busy, tinkering with the Triumph's scratched tank, tightening bolts that didn't need tightening. Jasper napped beside me, blissfully unaware of the storm about to break. The moment came just past 9. I heard her heels before I saw her, sharp, angry clicks across the concrete. Then the shriek. Where is it? I stepped out of the garage slowly, towel in hand. Evening. My car, she screamed, hair frizzing with fury. Where's my car? Oh, I said, squinting toward the empty garage. It got towed. Her jaw fell open. Towed? From inside your garage. You can't do that. You parked without permission. That's trespassing. And I've got it all on video. You've gone insane, she hissed. This is felony theft. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. I pulled out my phone. I already did. That stopped her. I filed a report earlier this evening, I said calmly, along with footage of your previous entries, the key damage to my motorcycle, and several emails showing the HOA board ignoring formal complaints. You want to talk felony? Let's. She staggered back, like I'd physically shoved her. You think the board will protect you after this? She snarled. You think your little trap changes anything? I and the HOA.
No, Karen.
You're just the noise. And I've had enough of it. She stormed off into the night, fingers jabbing at her phone, probably trying to conjure the board like witches to a bonfire. I didn't stop her. The wheels were already turning. The next morning, a police cruiser pulled into my driveway. Officer Daniels, a local, fair and square, the type who didn't care much for HOA drama but cared a lot about property law, stepped out. I reviewed your footage, he said without preamble. It's clear she entered without consent. Multiple times. The scratch on the bike lines up with the timing and the tool you found. That's criminal mischief at minimum. And the car? He cracked a grin. Perfectly legal tow. You hired a license service. She was on your property. Honestly, it's one of the cleaner cases I've seen. That afternoon, Karen got her car back, but not before paying Julio's release fee, $475 plus storage, tow, and handling. Cash only. Julio texted me a photo. Her expression looked like she'd swallowed battery acid. But that wasn't the victory. The real win came 3 days later, when the HOA board, finally waking up to liability, held a special emergency session. Karen didn't get the invite. She showed up anyway. They asked her to leave. When she refused, security escorted her out. A week later, she was officially removed as vice president. I wasn't interested in joining the board. I didn't want power. I just wanted peace. And for the first time since I'd moved into Ridgeway Pines, I finally had some. The neighborhood felt different. Not at first, not like some cinematic epiphany, but subtly. Like the way tension fades after a storm has passed. Conversations returned to porches. Lawns started looking a little less like competitive arenas and more like yards again. People smiled a little longer, nodded more freely. Karen, however, wasn't so lucky. After her removal from the HOA board, she tried to save face, claimed she stepped down voluntarily to pursue other commitments. But her usual squad of clipboard cronies didn't back her play. Turns out, when you cross enough lines, even sycophants start rethinking their loyalties. A week later, she listed her house. 3 weeks after that, a sold sign went up on her precious rosebush-lined lawn. I didn't gloat, didn't smile when the moving truck rolled up. But I did sit in a lawn chair with Jasper, sipping iced tea as her Lexus, now with a slightly dented fender from the scrapyard lot, backed out of Ridgeway Pines for the final time. She didn't make eye contact.
She didn't need to.
She knew. With Karen gone, the board restructured. They offered me a seat twice. I declined both times. My point had never been to hold power just to prove it could be checked. Instead, I worked behind the scenes, quietly advising the new board president, Angela. She was fair, level-headed, and most importantly, not driven by ego. Under her leadership, the HOA began reviewing its own bylaws, including a clause Karen had once championed that allowed board members access to private property for inspection purposes. It was struck down within a month. Funny how fast the rules can change when they're no longer written in fear. As for the Triumph, I buffed out the scratch. Repainted the tank myself, burnished silver, with a crimson streak slicing through the middle like a scar that had healed tougher than the skin around it. I kept the damaged tank too. Hung it on the garage wall like a war medal. Every time I looked at it, I remembered something important. Boundaries aren't lines on maps. They're lines people have to respect. And sometimes you have to enforce them yourself. Julio and I grabbed beers a few weeks after everything settled. He showed up in a black hoodie and work boots, grinning like the villain in a heist film. "That toe was legendary," he said, clinking bottles. "You ever think about joining the biz?" I laughed. "I think I'll stick to motorcycles." Still, the idea lingered. Not about towing, but about standing your ground. About neighbors not being afraid to say no to overreach. Maybe it wasn't just about garages and scratched paint. Maybe it was about setting the tone for a place worth living in. Later that night, as I watched Jasper chase fireflies across the yard, I realized something else. I'd moved here for peace, but I'd earned it through resistance. That peace felt deeper now.
Hard one.
Earned. One morning, a couple months later, I got a knock on my door. A young couple stood there, maybe early 30s, holding a clipboard. New neighbors. They introduced themselves, Erica and Jay, smiles bright, eyes a little nervous. "Sorry to bother you," Jay said. "The board said you'd be a good person to talk to about what it's really like living here." I smiled, stepped outside, and offered them a seat. They didn't need a sales pitch. They needed the truth. And that, finally, was something Ridgeway Pines had in abundance.